Hi, everybody. It's so good to see you all. Thanks for saying hi in the chat. Welcome, welcome. We are so excited to have you here to talk about VUCA and the lies that we tell ourselves when we are in VUCA environments. My name is Dr. Alexandra Walker. I am so excited to be here with you today. We've got so much stuff to talk to you about, so buckle in. I hope you're ready. Please know that you can communicate with us through chat. You can send us messages. You can send messages to everyone, just to panelists, just to a few of us. And I have members of my team on the line with us, prepared to answer anything that come up in the chat for you. If you have any trouble, let us know. Good morning, good morning. Hi, everybody. So let's dive right in. As I mentioned, my name is Dr. Alexandra Walker. This is my team, and we're from the Alliance for Community and Justice Innovation. When organizations are trying to do things that require people to think differently and act differently, there are always implementation challenges, always. And that's where we come in. That's kind of where we sit and the work that we do. Here's my team on the screen for you. We've got Johanna Leal and Allison Tapia and Amberly Chalberg. A couple of our members couldn't make it today, but we are here and excited to see all of you and to talk about VUCA. We sit in this space of implementation where we're all in organizations working to try to do our best work, to engage our people, retain our people, energize around our vision and around our whys. And while most of our work is in the human service or justice space, in the community space, it applies, this material here that we're going to talk about today applies to everyone, all agencies, big and small. We are all sitting in a VUCA space, and we're excited to talk to you about what that means and what you can do about it. So thanks for being here. Just know we're recording this today. And so we will be sending out this video recording to all of you in case you miss anything, if you have to check out, if you want to share it with a friend, you will get this towards the end of the week so that you can have it for your library and your records. Okay. So let's dive in. Can you share in the chat? Say hello. Some of you have already gotten there, but where are you from? What agency do you work for? Tell us about you so that we can get a good indication of where everyone is from. I saw some folks from Iowa. I saw some folks from Ohio on here, Colorado, of course, UK, Sweden is here. Where else is everyone from? Ohio, there we go. Washington, Minnesota. Yes, Minnesota, Denver, Virginia. I love this. Hello, everyone. It is so good to see you all. We've got Nebraska here. We've got Minnesota, Vermont. I love it. Illinois, so many. Washington, D.C., Maryland. Welcome, everyone. Whether you're close by or far away, I think we can all resonate with this material. So we're so excited to see everyone here and excited to dive in to VUCA. So let's start there. Let's talk about what is this VUCA thing that you're talking about, Alex? So I want to talk to you about VUCA, which stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And we've been living in some pretty challenging times for a long while now. Few things that we deal with in our organizations could be considered predictable, meaning there's a clear cause and effect, an obvious direction to go in. We can repeat our solutions over and over again and get the same result. Very few things that we're doing these days fit into that predictable space. Most of the things we do, or a lot of the things we do, are considered complicated, meaning we might be able to all reasonably agree on the ultimate outcome. What's the best case scenario here? But reasonable experts will disagree on how to get there. So we know where we're headed and what we want, but how we get there, people have different opinions about what the best way to go is and how we can do that work. But VUCA environments are even more different than that. In VUCA environments, we often don't agree on what the best outcome is. Perhaps we can't even see what the potential answers are. People have very different opinions about whether we should go this way or that way, and then all sorts of thoughts about how to get there. VUCA environments have a lot of interacting forces, lots of people involved, lots of moving parts, politics, agendas, all of those types of things, which require us to think differently about how we go about our work. So when we're in a VUCA space, which most of our organizations are in this VUCA space, we have to build some new skills, because what we did yesterday won't necessarily work for today. And I'm here to tell you that just about everything that we do that has to do with people, and especially change, can be considered VUCA, whether it is culture change, employee engagement and retention, coaching and development, new innovations. All of these things are complex. They are VUCA. And so we have to build some new skills. VUCA is a framework that you can use to think through, is this a predictable issue, a complicated issue, or am I in VUCA? So that you can remind yourself to do a few things a little bit differently, which we're going to get to in a few moments. And VUCA creates the space where things are constantly changing. And so what you might believe about a situation right now can change a few minutes from now, a few hours from now. What you try and think is the best route today might not be the best route tomorrow. So we have some unclear information. We're not really sure what the best outcome is. The variables and the different drivers are changing. And so we have to really work in this space where things are uncertain, ambiguous, we don't have a lot of clarity, and that can create a lot of stress for us as leaders and in the work that we're doing. So let's go through each one of these really quickly so you know what each piece of VUCA means. Volatile is about the speed of change, that things are changing so quickly. The players change, the agendas change, the direction changes, what we know changes. And so volatility is that things are constantly changing. It's hard to know everything at any given moment. When we think about uncertainty, this has to do with predictability. Things aren't predictable like we might have been used to in the past. There isn't this clear cause and effect. And so our general sense of awareness and understanding is lacking because we just don't quite know where things are coming from and what's driving them. And that makes things really complex. And by complex, we mean that there's so many different forces and things coming into play at the same time that it can create a lot of chaos and confusion about what we're doing, why we're doing it, the direction we're even headed in. It can create a lot of confusion, not just for ourselves, but for all of our staff and our organizations. And then ultimately, ambiguity is really about the potential for misreads, that even though you've got some information in front of you, you might misread what it all means when it comes together because things have mixed meanings or there's different factors involved that might not even be on your radar that are contributing to whatever the challenge is in front of you at the time. And so the VUCA mental model is this helpful framework that you can use to think through when you're in a VUCA space, when things are changing quickly, you don't have all the information, they're complicated and creating some confusion and chaos, and you might have it all wrong. You think you have a sense of what's going on, but you might not be quite right. This is the time to really invoke a VUCA leadership mindset and do things a little bit differently. And so it's a way of thinking through that complexity and handling some of the challenges by giving up our need for clarity and certainty and trying to pick a direction instead of a destination. And we're going to give you some more context about what all of this means and how you can put it into practice in your day-to-day work. And so we want to help you embrace VUCA because, at least for us, that's where we've been sitting for a while. Let us know in the chat if you are not in a VUCA space. If you're like, what's this VUCA thing? That doesn't happen to us in our organization. Never, never. So share in the chat if you can. What are your thoughts about what the last few years have been like? When you think about VUCA, does any of that resonate for you when you think about and reflect on the last few years? And how has it impacted you at work? How has it impacted your engagement, your motivation, your energy level? What has it been like for you? So I'd love to hear from folks. I feel VUCA in my marrow. Oh, Rachel, I do too. So you can resonate with this. I'm curious, what does it do for you in terms of showing up as your best self at work? Uncertain for sure, lots of changes. Yes, thanks for sharing that. People are resetting. Thanks, Tira. It's so good to see you. My whole role and focus has changed and transformed. I live in VUCA. Yes, it's been a cluster. I love this chaotic, exhausting, the speed of change. Yes, we're all feeling it. The chaos, absolutely. It's hard. I appreciate that so much, Caitlin. Like, what is the priority? Where should I start? Everything feels like a crisis. Everything feels like mission critical. We're all drowning in crisis all day long. And so that's a really good example of what it feels like to live in VUCA. And I'm seeing people say, crazy busy, stressful, progress is stunted, chaotic, exhausted. Maybe some folks are feeling burnt out. It can be tough to live in this space. And so that's what we really want to talk to you about today is some of the things that it does to us and our organizations when we're living in that space, and then what you can do about it. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to cover some of the lies, some of the stories that we tell ourselves when we're living in VUCA, what it brings up for us and how that impacts how we respond to situations. And we want to introduce 4 organizational strategies, things that you can do within your organization to address VUCA, but more importantly, some micro techniques, because you might not be able to have a ton of control over the forces that are at play in your organization or in your system. But what you do have control over is yourself and how you show up and how you lead. So we're also going to think through some individual micro techniques, things that you can do every single day to help get through VUCA and make it out in one piece with a smile on your face and energy to come back tomorrow. So let's get into this. What is the impact that VUCA has on our work? And a lot of you put this in the chat. It is, we often don't know what the priorities are. There's conflicting initiatives, different priorities. You're running here, you're running there. We see a lot of projects stop after some time, whether they fizzle and fade or they disappear altogether. I hear from a lot of folks like, I remember we were working on that thing. Whatever happened to that thing? Well, it gets lost and buried in VUCA when things are feeling really chaotic. A lot of us are struggling with staffing and retention and engagement. And that is a direct effect of living in a VUCA space for long periods of time and using our old strategies in a VUCA space, which don't always work very well. We get focused on managing crisis. So I know a lot of people who talk about, I sit in my car, I take some deep breaths, I do a little meditation, and then I walk in just ready to get bombarded as soon as I walk in the door with the 50,000 things that are in crisis right now that I have to handle. I don't get to my to-do list because I'm buried in all the stuff that's happening. It can create organizational culture challenges that we end up having to deal with in different ways that get in the way of all of the good work that we're trying to do. And we can become fractured. Our organizations can get siloed and we can start pointing fingers in different ways. So VUCA can have some really detrimental impacts on our work within our agencies and our organizations. More importantly than that, though, it can have tremendous psychological impacts on you as an individual and your staff. Things like analysis paralysis, feeling like you don't have enough information to make decisions, and that creates so much stress and anxiety. Lots of uncertainty and fear, lots of extra stress. How many people are having the Sunday scaries and not sleeping very well? Hopefully it's just Sundays if you have them, but some of us don't sleep well all week because of how stressful and frustrated and anxious we feel about what if we get it wrong? What if we go in the wrong direction? What if something horrible happens? That's the space that we can live in when we are living in VUCA. And it sounds like this is resonating for some of you. So it is this constant state of change with this added layer of a lack of control and certainty and the ability to say, this is the right answer, this is what we're going to do, and it's going to fix our problem, whatever that might be, that can create all of this in our day-to-day life. And as you don't need me to tell you this, this has tremendous impacts on your physical body, on your psychological state, on your family, and on your ability to just live a great, balanced, happy life. This can be very stressful. So we want to address some of this today. So let's talk about the first lie that comes up when we're in this space of constant change. So tell me, have you ever been tasked with taking over a project that's not doing so well or struggling? Or maybe you've taken on a team or a department or an agency that is struggling, failing, not meeting the mark where they're supposed to. And maybe when you get there and you're looking around, your instant thought is like, I don't think we have the right people at the table, or we don't have enough resources to even get this done. But yet you're under a tremendous amount of pressure to get it done and get it done right. Well, this is where that first set of lies can come in under VUCA. Things like, nothing's ever going to change with this group of people at the helm, or things can never be different in this particular organization, or this thing that we are doing, of course, is going to fail because we've got all the wrong people and all the wrong resources, and this could just never work the way that we have it. Those are some pretty common lies that we tell ourselves when we are feeling the stress of being under pressure to meet outcomes, but feeling like things aren't moving fast enough, effectively enough, impactfully enough to get there. And so we forget sometimes that doing new things or getting good outcomes takes time, effort, energy, intentionality, and all the other forces at play in VUCA can really get in the way of doing intentional implementation and doing that intentional work to get it there. And so instead, we go straight to these lies of nothing's ever going to change. It doesn't matter what we do, we're not going to be able to get this done here. And I love what Miranda's saying in the chat. This is talking in absolutes, which is a red flag. Such a great point. A lot of the lies that we tell ourselves in VUCA states are really rigid, kind of black and white thinking, very absolutist ways of thinking about things. And part of the goal here is to get us to step outside of that, to let those thoughts happen because they're going to happen, but then push yourself to step outside of that because these are in fact lies. So one of the antidotes to VUCA, the things that you can do to try to address at least volatility of change, the speed of change, and how things are coming at you, is to really get clear about what your vision is. And when we talk about vision, we're really talking about setting a direction as opposed to a destination. So another way that we can get really rigid in a VUCA state is saying it must be done like this by this time and this way. And that can really limit our opportunities and our ability to be flexible in a VUCA, ambiguous, uncertain environment. And so having a vision is about really setting a direction. This is our directional goal. This is where we're striving to go, not necessarily we're going to get to this particular destination by this time. And even more so than having a vision, it's then really about trusting that vision over time. So having that direction, knowing that that's kind of the direction you want to head in, and really trying to do things that get you there. And then trusting it when things get hard, when things go wrong, when things fall apart, because they will. That's the way it goes. And so having a vision is really about every time crisis comes up, every time things switch and change, really going back to that vision and saying, how can this align with our vision? Does it get us closer to that? Hopefully it's not taking us in the opposite direction. Those are the things you really have to address. But staying true and trusting that vision and letting the specific destination or how you get there be more flexible. It helps you to promote brainstorming and really think through all of the different options that you and your organization have to get you there. There's no one right way. It's rather, we're just moving in this direction. So let's talk about another set of lies that can come up for us in this. So let's say we have a pretty clear vision. We know where we're trying to go and what we're trying to do. Have you ever felt frustrated that things aren't happening fast enough? They're not happening at the pace that you were hoping to see them happen at, or maybe they're not happening the way you wanted to see them happen? Do you have an idea in your mind about what it looks like to follow that vision and don't see others jumping on board or doing it the way that you'd hoped? And I'm going to say something a little bit, a little tough to hear, but are there some of us that feel really good to be the one at the table to do it all? Who, even though we have teams or there's other people who might do things different than we want or at a different pace, it feels really good to be the one who's at the table that people can go to, that does it all, that somehow gets miraculous things done in short time frames, that we can really muscle through and get all sorts of stuff done. These are some of the things that come out of feeling the stress of VUCA that can lead to lies like, I can do this all on my own. If I work hard enough, I alone can make this happen. If I put things together and get it all set up, then people can just pick it up and run with it. But I have to do that front work to make sure that it's done and it's done right. And here's the challenge. The very nature of VUCA environments mean that rarely can we be successful at doing anything on our own. No matter how charismatic, energetic, how much we're willing to put our family to the side and our personal lives to the side and just muscle through stuff, we alone don't have enough to get through a VUCA environment. VUCA, by its very nature, requires different possibilities and perspectives and opinions and insights and people. You need a whole army of people to do good work in a VUCA environment. And so that's part of the challenge of muscling through. It's a lie we tell ourselves that we can do it all on our own. The reality is we really can't if we want to do something that's sustainable, that can last over time, even when we're not completely focused on it. The other piece of this is that unilateral decision-making doesn't tend to take things very far. So even if we try to make all the decisions and put everything in place and just get it done so we can say that it's done, unfortunately, as soon as things are outside of our locus of control or outside of our circle of influence, people go back to doing what they're used to doing, or perhaps don't understand why a decision was made, so they don't necessarily follow it. And so it ends up being something that causes us to double down on our need for control. We have to control everything, and that can actually be to our detriment. And when you or those specific champions that you might know of who like to muscle through stuff and do it all on their own end up promoting, leaving, or getting burnt out, then the things that they've worked so hard on tend to fizzle and fade. And so it does a disservice for everyone when we try to muscle through and do things all on our own. VUCA requires teamwork. So muscling through things on your own is actually a form of avoidance. And so if you're one of those people, and I'm super guilty of this, so know that this is a lie that I really resonate with and have over my career and have worked hard to try to step outside of. If this is something that resonates for you, it's worth asking the question, what am I avoiding by just saying, I'll just do it myself? Perhaps it's avoiding some tough conversations. Perhaps you're overlooking some behaviors that aren't helpful. And instead of going through and addressing them or having those conversations, you'd just rather do it yourself. Perhaps you're avoiding the possibility that there's other ways of doing things because you like things done this particular way. And so we really want to think through, if you're muscling through stuff and trying to do it all on your own, what is it that you might be avoiding because it feels hard or it doesn't feel like it's worth your time? And then really asking yourself, is this something that's worth sustaining? Because if it is, you're going to need more people than just you. So let me just check in really quick with the chat. Yes, that's why I'm always tired. Thanks for owning that. I'm with you, Vanessa. That is the way that it can go. And this is part of embracing VUCA and changing the way that we think, that we engage, and that we act to address VUCA. It might have worked before when things were very predictable to just muscle through and do it yourself because it's predictable. And whatever you did today is going to work tomorrow, and someone can just pick up if you leave. It doesn't work that way anymore. So when we look at the antidote to VUCA, U stands for uncertainty. So the antidote to that is really building some understanding. It is about slowing down. And I know you don't like to hear that. I know it's not fun to slow down, but it's really about taking a pause and trying to understand what's getting in the way. What is it about how someone is doing something, or what the perceptions that I have about why they're not jumping in or why they're not engaging, that I can get some more understanding about. It's really about trying to be more flexible in your mind, because again, these lies are pretty rigid, and to making sure that you understand all the different pieces and parts, or as many as you possibly can, in order to help support your team, to support building champions across your organization, and to really understanding what are all the possibilities that might happen. And this has to do with getting feedback, thinking through who am I not talking to, what assumptions am I making that might be getting in the way, and how can I expand my reach by including other people so that it's not just me and something might fall apart if I move on, if I burn out, or if I can't be completely focused and immersed in this thing for the next 10 years. So let's talk about another lie. Have you ever thought, okay, this thing is important and people aren't buying in. So what if we pull together like a group or a committee or some experts who can research all the things, give us some recommendations, tell us why this is a good idea, and show us the data. And once people see why it's a good idea and they see the data, then they will buy in, then they will come on board. And then you build this committee, or you bring in the experts, or you provide the data, and people still don't buy in. It can be incredibly frustrating. And so that is part of this lie that we're telling ourselves, that once everyone's bought in, then it will be easy, then it will be successful. I can force people to buy in, because once they see the data and once they know that I'm not giving up on this thing, they're going to come on board, and then they'll be excited about it. And when people see what I can see, then they will be jumping at the bit to jump in, just like I was. And unfortunately, that's not always the case. Even in front of undeniable evidence, we don't always follow through with the things that are best for us or for our organizations, because of some of our default settings, where we are creatures of habit and we like to do things the way that we've been doing them. And so some of the lies that we tell ourselves is that we need everyone's buy-in, and only then it can be successful. And buy-in is really a process. It is not an event, and it is something that you can never stop working on. And unfortunately for all of us, you can't force people to buy into things. So even though some of our go-to strategies are performance plans and policies and procedures and holding people to those kinds of things, those aren't as effective as really trying to figure out what's going on for people, where's the disconnect for them, and how can we help them engage in what we're doing. And so when we think about the antidote, again, C was complexity in VUCA. The antidote to that is building clarity, really communicating about why you're doing something, what's important about it, what impact it's supposed to have, but also building clarity around what's getting in the way for people, what they're worried about, what barriers they're experiencing. And it's trying to make sure that you understand how people connect to what you're asking them to do, selecting the right people to engage in things, and finding spaces and places for everyone to be able to be their most effective and most impactful. And that might sound very altruistic, but it's really possible when you deeply understand why people are doing this work, why they come in, what's important to them, what they're good at, what their talents are. And so you can really use all of that to collaborate with your teams and help build buy-in over time, understanding that it ebbs and flows. It's going to change over time. And so when you have complexity, you can try to create some clarity, not just so that other people understand why you're doing something, but more importantly, so you understand what's getting in the way for folks. What's the missing information? Where's the confusion and chaos? And how can you embrace your inner broken record so that you can bring people alongside with you so they can build some buy-in along the way? Then, of course, there's lie number 4. So have you ever experienced a situation where a group of stakeholders have come together and start questioning, why hasn't this been implemented yet? Why aren't you having more success? We gave you money, or you promised to do this thing, and now it's not happening the way that we hoped it would happen. And perhaps if you're anything like me, you've experienced situations like that throughout your career, and then maybe you go to a webinar, or you attend a conference, or you hear something or read something about something people are doing somewhere else that sounds like it's working better than what you're doing. And you start to believe that everyone else is doing better than you are. They have something figured out. And you know what it is? It's that they're using a different tool. So remember, we know what the outcome is that we want, perhaps, but there's many different ways to get there. Perhaps you run into an example of someone who has a similar outcome to what you're trying to get, but they're using a different path to get there. And what that can lead us to tell ourselves as a lie is a different practice, program, or policy would work better. It's mostly the tool's fault, or the thing that we're doing. So if we just change the thing, then we'll get better outcomes. Or this thing we're using might be possible over there, but it's not possible over here. And this lie can lead us to cycle through evidence-based practices, programs, or even just ideas, hoping that we'll find that silver bullet, hoping that we'll find that thing that will unlock the mysteries of why we haven't been able to get to the outcomes we wanted in the past, and will bring us all the success that we're looking for. And unfortunately, this is often not true. There are some times where we have a desired outcome, we pick a potential tool, and it really isn't the right fit. But for most of our organizations and most of our work, we don't actually implement things and implement them with fidelity. I mean, we don't do them and do them well for a long enough period of time to really know if it works. When our stakeholders come to us and say, why isn't this working better? Most of us haven't been able to fully implement it yet. So it's not working because we haven't fully implemented it yet. And perhaps once we do, we would learn that it's not the right fit, or we need to make some changes. And that is the nature of this work. Even our best plans and all the research in the world, we're still going to have to change course over time as we learn things about what works and what doesn't. But we tend to blame the tool or the thing itself, as opposed to going deeper and looking at whether or not we're actually implementing things well, and if we've met any measure of fidelity. And so when we're telling ourselves this lie, when we're looking for the next shiny thing to perhaps save our organization or get rid of all of our headaches, we can really think about how to better adapt and align around what we have, as opposed to throwing everything out and starting all over again, which has a whole bunch of other challenges that come with it. And so adapting and aligning is really thinking back to the beginning. What's our vision? What's the direction that we're going in? What do we understand about what's happening right now, and where we might have some gaps or need some more ideas, perspectives, or understanding about what's happening? How can we build some clarity about why we're going in this direction, what we're going to use to get there, how we're going to make those things happen? And then start aligning around those things, getting rid of the things that are misaligned, that are taking us in the opposite direction or are getting in the way, and really strengthening those things that are aligned with where we're trying to go. And it has to do with creating some urgency. So people, we have a tendency to do a lot of really effective or just wild changes in a crisis. If you think about COVID, it's a great example. So many of our organizations were able to do things that we said for decades we could never do, like remote work. And yet, crisis, we were able to do it. And so creating some sense of urgency around why we're headed in that direction can be helpful. It's really about thinking about how to build those foundations. What are a few things that we could really focus on and do them really well that would get us a little bit closer to where we're trying to go? And so alignment is the work of implementation. It's all about saying, these are the things that are most important to us. It's part of our vision. That's the direction we're headed. And here's all the things we can do in our day-to-day, the things we can do and do well, the things that we can really focus and be intentional about to help us get there, and aligning around those things as we work to deprioritize some of the stuff that either gets in the way or doesn't help us get there at all. And so when we think about VUCA, we've talked through what VUCA is and what the organizational opportunities are to address VUCA, being we have to have a vision that we can trust and rally behind. To build understanding and think about who aren't we speaking to, who's not here at the table, what perspectives are we missing, what else do we need to know, and then create some clarity, both for our staff about where we're going and how we're going to try to get there, but also understanding how people connect with that. What are some of the barriers for them? How can we help people engage in that vision? And then align. I guarantee all of you have some rules that perhaps you follow that are misaligned with where you're trying to go. You might even have some rules that exist that no one follows until someone gets in trouble. Thinking through those types of things, thinking through people's day-to-day habits. How are those habits aligned with where we're trying to go? And how can we better align them so that we get there maybe faster? Wouldn't that be nice? So when we are in a VUCA space and things get hard, we feel stressed, we feel that anxiety, we're under pressure. Some of the other lies that we might tell ourselves are, this will be better if I just ignore the talks at the water cooler and the pressure from this group and this person who feels resistant. If I just ignore that, or I ignore the things that aren't very exciting or interesting, then we'll have a better chance. So maybe it's when so-and-so retires, then things will be fine. So I'll just ignore them until they actually retire. Or maybe it's if we just restructure. Once we restructure, and I don't have to have any of those tough conversations or deal with any of the things that are getting in the way. We'll just put this group under a different group and then magically things will get better. These are some lies that we are telling ourselves when we get that stress of VUCA. Once we get here, then we're done. Well, that is an unfortunate lie for all of us, that we're really playing the infinite game. This is the long game of system change and quality work that takes our whole careers and more to keep moving in that direction of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish with the people we serve. When we get everyone here, then we can pause as another way of saying that. Also, we have to be prepared for every imaginable barrier to come up before we can start. So that's a lot of that analysis paralysis that can come from the complexity, uncertainty, and ambiguity that exists in a VUCA space, where it's like, I have to know everything before I can move forward with anything. And that can really stall all of our efforts, excuse me, when we're trying to move an organization forward. Finally, I'll have more peace, happiness, and success if I just really focus on getting everything perfect. And there's a whole other conversation we can have about perfection and how many of us try to embrace that perfection, but it's actually doing us a disservice. As one of our colleagues, Glenn, would say, perfection is a vice, not a virtue. And it gets in the way of our ability to really exist in a VUCA space. And so one of the things that you can think about as you pull together vision, understanding, clarity, and alignment is really understanding the why. What is the problem that I'm trying to solve? What benefit does it add? And when things get really hard, because they will this thing still be worth it? Will it be worth the muck that we have to go through to do that? it's really easy to get lost in VUCA. And you can know very easily if you're lost in VUCA if all you're doing is running around from crisis to crisis to crisis to crisis. That's a good sign that you're living in VUCA and you're drowning in VUCA. It's really a leader's role, and we are all leaders in our own spaces, even if it's informal leaders, that we talk about the why behind, why does our organization exist? What value does it add? What is our role in this space? And really help people to align around that, because our people are busy doing the day-to-day work. They're buried in their own stuff that they have to accomplish. And so as VUCA leaders, we're standing on the balcony and we're really helping people to connect with the larger why about why our organizations exist, what we're trying to do. Again, focusing on setting a direction and worrying less about the destination and how we get there, making sure that people understand that direction and are moving in that way. And so our job is to really try to help people figure out, why should I care? Why should I do this thing? Why does it matter to me? So as we think about VUCA and leading within VUCA, we talked about 4 organizational strategies: vision, understanding, clarity, and alignment. We really need to be thinking about some of these competencies that help us sit in a VUCA space, because I don't know about you, but I don't think it's going to get any easier anytime soon. And so VUCA leadership competencies require us to think differently, to be able to understand the difference between something that's complicated, where we understand the outcome, there's just different ways to get there, versus complex, where we don't know what the best outcome would be, and there's lots of different opportunities, that we can really choose that direction over a destination and think about patterns instead of certainties. So looking for different ways that we can figure things out instead of wanting that answer, that piece of data that's going to fix our understanding problem. We really have to embrace listening and curiosity and getting comfortable being with others in public and learning together, not knowing together, and sitting in VUCA together, as well as act differently. So meeting to create, to brainstorm, to problem solve, as opposed to doing that behind closed doors and simply informing people when you're in public spaces. And really encouraging that experimentation piece. How can we try things out without having to have the end all be all answer? Because what we know today will never be enough for what we need to know for tomorrow. And so when we think about it, this is really about creating a VUCA leadership mindset. It is a way of going about your work and your life with a reframe. And it's really a habit of mind. So we're going to tell you about 3 micro techniques. And some of you might be like, no, duh, Alex, of course these things are important. But the reality is that these things that we're going to talk about have a tendency to be the things that get moved to the bottom of the list when you're buried in crisis. They become less and less important over time if we don't make it a habit, if we're not constantly training and developing ourselves so that we are better suited, better able to sit in these VUCA spaces and still be effective. So these micro techniques we're about to talk about are actually an implementation problem. They require our own intentionality, our own commitment to doing them every day, often, always, and being committed to those things so that we can be more effective in a VUCA space. And so it's, again, just a reminder that our systems and our organizations are complex, and vision, understanding, clarity, and alignment can help us in those spaces. But we don't have the same amount of control over our organizations and systems, even if we are the formal leader, as we do of ourselves, how we show up, and how we lead. And so these micro techniques we're about to talk about are really about embracing that there's no clear answers, no straight lines, that we have to get really good at sitting in that uncomfortable space of uncertainty, of ambiguity, of complexity, so that we can rise in that as opposed to just getting buried in all the crazy that comes with that. So these are 3 individual micro techniques. We're going to talk through each one of them, But I'm here to say that leaders who do these consistently over time and are committed to developing these for themselves are simply more impactful. They retain staff, they engage teams, they implement more successfully, they're able to shift organizational culture, they get better outcomes because leaders who are shown to engage in these micro techniques regularly are simply more successful in organizational settings. So that's why we're bringing these to you today as a way of addressing those individual emotional side effects and psychological side effects that are a natural result of sitting in VUCA for a really long time. And so let's start with the VUCA hijack that will lead us to talking about this empathy piece. We are experiencing volatile change every day, all day long. I mean, in almost an unprecedented way, things are changing all the time. And so of all the things, and given the sheer amount of things that you have to deal with and address every single day, you are going to experience the psychological impacts of VUCA, which, just as a quick reminder, include things like fear, uncertainty, anxiety, frustration, stress, analysis paralysis. Those things are a common result of being in this VUCA space. And so in those moments, we have a tendency to get hijacked. We feel that stress, we feel the pressure of having to get it right, and we go to our default setting. We double down on the things that we are tried and true, are baked into our DNA, things like getting really rigid, thinking very concretely about what's happening in front of us, and going straight to technical solutions. What's the easiest Band-Aid fix that I can put on this thing? And we have a tendency to ignore, avoid, or pretend it doesn't exist, the things that are more complicated, that are more ambiguous, that are more complex. And so in the context of these emotional side effects, if you resonate with them, I guarantee you people in your organization are also feeling these things and are probably to some degree hijacked as a result. And so you're getting a group of people together who are all feeling those impacts of VUCA and are all doubling down in order to create some comfort, some safety, some predictability. We're doubling down on our default, which is making things predictable, making things very rigid and concrete. And so part of understanding your VUCA hijack is not just knowing that you're probably getting hijacked, but also knowing how it causes you to respond in those moments, which tends to be, for most of us, getting really rigid. And so creating some awareness, not just for yourself, but also talking to other people about this and helping them to understand what are some of the lies that you're telling yourself. What's your go-to lie, the one you resonate with the most, and how does that cause you to respond? And how does that response potentially lead to more VUCA, not just for you, but for everybody else? And so it's thinking about what gets me hijacked, how does it create a response in me, both in how I feel and how I act, and then what can I do to shift my focus in those moments? And so that's where this micro technique of empathy comes in. So I'd love for you to take a minute and put into chat, what is the lie that you resonated with the most? What's one that comes up for you when you're in a VUCA space? I admitted to mine, which is I'll just do it myself. It's easier if I just do it myself, or I can get it done and at least I'll know it's done right. Those kinds of things are the lies that come up most frequently for me. I can do it on my own. It sounds like some others can resonate with that one. Thanks for sharing that. Defensiveness. If I don't do it, who will? Yep, I've felt that too. It's easier and faster if I do it on my own. Lies number 4. So those are the ones about like something else might be a better fit. Nothing's going to change around here. This will never change. This is great. So it sounds like a different practice or program would be better. Everyone's too busy. If it's not broke, don't fix it. I'll just do it myself. Great. So think about that primary lie. We all have it. So you might have resonated with all of the different lies we talked about today, but we all have kind of a go-to one that tends to pop up the most. And so get really clear about that lie that you tell yourself most often when you're feeling stressed, fearful, uncertain, under a lot of pressure, and things are changing fast and there's no clear right answer. And then I want you to think about, how does it cause you to react? If for some of you who resonated with the lie that I resonate with, it causes you to just take it all on yourself. And then what happens? Do you feel resentful? Do you start blaming others or making assumptions about others? Do you start creating distance between you and others because you can just get it done, or no one's working as hard as I do, or I'm the only one who cares about this? So think through, when you're telling yourself that lie, not just what is your initial reaction or even your physical reaction, but what's going on in your head when you're telling yourselves those lies, and what's that go-to response? How does it cause you to react in your organization? And then think about what might better serve you and those around you. Because what I can tell you is that when we're in VUCA and we're experiencing those psychological side effects, we tell ourselves those lies and we think it's only going to impact us, but it doesn't. It impacts everybody around us. It impacts how we show up, how we talk to people. Someone mentioned being curt or being short with people. It impacts our environments, which can create additional VUCA for other people, because now they're wondering, what's up with you and what's going on and what are you thinking and what do I not know? And so that can be really, really challenging. So we have to kind of understand the stories that we're telling ourselves and the long-term impacts of not breaking those stories. So what would be more helpful? Reminding yourself that I can't do this alone. It might be easier right now for me to do this on my own, but in the long run, I'm going to need a lot of other people. It might take more time today for me to have these tough conversations, for me to say, I feel like you're not pulling your weight, or I feel like you're going about this the wrong way and it makes me want to take it back. Those are tough conversations to have. But having them and starting that process can be a lot more beneficial, not just for you, but for your organization, than ignoring it, avoiding it, hoping it goes away, or becoming the person who has all the knowledge, all the information, all the abilities, so that if you're ever not there, no one else can function. That is not healthy for your organization. So thinking about what would better serve you and those around you, and what does it mean to model that empathy, not just for yourself, but for everyone else? And so when we think about empathy, it's about saying, man, I am experiencing some of those psychological side effects of VUCA, and that's normal, and I'm human. And these are the things that happen when we live in this space. And if I'm feeling it, other people are feeling it. And if I'm struggling with how to manage it, how to address it, other people in my organization are struggling with the same thing. And so how can we build some empathy? How can we call these things out? Because these are lies that we all tell ourselves. It's not just you, it's not just me, it's all humans. And so the side effects are also universally experienced for those who are functioning in VUCA spaces, and they're having an impact on what we're able to accomplish and what we're able to do in our organization. And I love Christy's suggestion. Everyone can sign up for our VUCA support group after this, but we all need it. We need to remind ourselves and to remind each other that this is a real consequence of living in a VUCA environment. It's not that there's something wrong with you or that you're not capable or able to do these things. It's really that this is what happens when you're in that space for a long time. And if we can all recognize it and start helping each other to shift the lies and the stories we're telling ourselves, we can actually have a big impact on our default setting of how we react to them. Then the next piece of this is calming our inner problem solver. So complexity, again, causes us to go to our default setting, which is rigidity, technical solutions. What's the easiest thing that I can do to say that I address this and check it off my list? And that comes from our inner default setting of wanting to solve problems as quickly as possible and move on to the next threat, the next issue that's coming our way. But complexity and VUCA require that we get curious. They require that we question our assumptions, You give me a problem, I assume I know all the different pieces and parts of it, and then I go with my regular go-to fix. Those assumptions that I have about what's going on, especially in a VUCA space, are probably wrong. They are probably off in some way, shape, or form. And so we have to think through, how can we pause before we jump into problem solving, so that we don't solve problems that don't need to be solved, and we don't just solve the technical pieces of problems, but rather get at some of the tougher, more abstract and squishy stuff that's going on. Because of how our brains work, we double down on those rigid, concrete strategies, the technical solutions. Yet in VUCA, what we need is flexibility, experimentation, and that starts with recognizing VUCA's tough. It brings up a lot of psychological stuff for us and causes us to tell ourselves some lies. And then that we can't just jump into problem solving, we have to get curious first. So just like you wouldn't jump into strategy when you don't have the awareness of what's going on, you wouldn't jump into a to-do list before people are actually motivated to do anything. We also want to take a pause before we jump into problem solving and first get curious. So paying attention to where the energy is in the room and understanding how we might be impacting that energy. So if you think back to the empathy piece, we're telling ourselves some lies, and that is impacting how we show up and the energy that we're putting out onto the network. And people are picking up on that. Even if we're not saying anything out loud, people are picking up on the energy that we are putting down. So we have to be really mindful of how we might be impacting spaces just by showing up with the lies that are in our head, or with the stress that we're feeling because of VUCA in those moments. Another piece of getting curious is thinking about, who have I written off as lazy, unwilling, resistant, difficult, and therefore am not talking to about what might be going on below the surface for them? Who am I avoiding? There are all people in our lives that we avoid. And unfortunately, we miss out on a lot of the learning that can come, the different opinions, the different perspectives, thinking about things in ways that we maybe haven't thought about them, which is exactly what's required to get through a VUCA space. It's not doing what we've always done and hoping magically that we'll get different results. It's about doing things differently. And that requires us to think about things differently. And that requires us to talk to people who we don't normally talk to, because the people in our inner circle have a tendency to think a lot like us. And especially if you're in a formal leadership role, the higher up you go, the less honesty you get about what's really going on, the fewer truth tellers you have in your court, because people are all just trying to make sure that you maybe don't know that things aren't quite going the way they want to, either because they care about you, or they don't want to hurt you or frustrate you, or they don't want to look bad. There's a million different reasons why. But when we avoid or write off certain groups of people or certain people, we miss out on the opportunity to understand their perspective. There's also this idea of yes, but versus yes, and. We have a tendency to be yes, but people, just by nature of how our brains are hardwired. Yeah, but we could never do that, or we don't have the money, or no one will go for it, or it could never work, or whatever those things are that we tell ourselves. And if you want to just try this out, in the next meeting that you go to, just listen for all the times that ideas or innovations or thoughts that people have that they share get shut down by a yes, but type of response. And over time, it leads to people not bringing up ideas or innovations at all. So if you go to your next meeting and say, no one actually offered any ideas or innovations, that might be the result of a long period of time of being shut down around ideas. We can never do that here. That'll never work here. We don't have the money, the staff, the resources, the time, all those kinds of things. And that can really get in the way. Trying to embrace a yes and perspective is really about looking for, what piece of that could you get behind? What piece of that could you build on? And it's not about saying, yes, and that sounds great, let's start tomorrow. It's about getting curious. It's about saying, yeah, and I wonder if we also did this piece on top of that, or I wonder if, who might else be interested in this thing that we're doing. And so yes, and is not about jumping to problem solving, jumping to to-do lists, jumping to action, but rather sitting in that curiosity space and saying, And I wonder what kind of impact that would have. And I wonder what else is possible. And what an interesting idea. What else are you thinking about? And really trying to get curious in that space. Finally, we talk about a micro technique of looking for the 10%. In many cases, things feel really complicated or hard, or the timing feels off. Even really awful ideas generally have 10% to them that we can all get behind. There's usually 10% of what's going on for someone that we can empathize with, get curious about, be interested in. So even if you go back to those folks who you might have written off or are avoiding, there's still at least 10% of what's going on for them that you can engage with, that you can agree with, that you can empathize with. And so even in the most difficult of things, embracing curiosity around the 10% that you can be for helps you to engage in that power of curiosity, to build on where the energy might be. Even the worst possible idea ever, we're now going to start doing XYZ, and you think that's the worst idea ever. There may be about 10% of that idea that you could get behind, that you could say, okay, well, I hate the whole thing, but this piece of part of it is something that I can agree with, something that I can get behind, and then growing from there. And so helping other people as well on your teams to try to look for the pieces and parts that they can get behind. Finally, we have this piece about learning in public. This is a really important VUCA leadership mindset quality. And it's this idea that we take off our expert hats, we take off our need to be perfect, we take off our need to know everything, and we put on our hat of learner. Because whatever we know today is probably not enough to help us tomorrow. We always have to be learning. And when we learn in public, we not only signal to people that it's okay to get things wrong, it's okay to not know things, which helps people get curious and helps people ask for other ideas, but it also models for people that we can fail forward. We can try some things out and we can be wrong, and that's okay. We're still going to learn as a result of it. So as a VUCA leader, even just not sharing, what you know or what you think or what ideas you have, rather switching it and sharing with people what you're confused about, what you have questions about, what you're curious about, what's still uncertain for you. Just switching that alone can be really helpful to learn in public. I still don't quite understand how this works with that, or how this fits with that, or why we do this thing. I want to learn more about that. That is an example of learning in public. And it's a willingness to try new things in front of people. It's a willingness to not know everything and not try to fill gaps when we don't have all the information, in hopes that you can build on all the people around you to help you fill in those gaps. And so it leads to the last micro technique, which is experimentation. It's managing our default setting, which is like, here's the problem, here's the answer, that's what we're doing, the end. And rather embracing a experimentation lens to things. What could we try? What are some options that we have? And to really stretch yourself as much as you can, because when we think about the anxiety that comes, the anxiety is a clear psychological effect of VUCA. That anxiety by its very nature leads us to that default setting where we shut off new ideas. Anxiety in that space, we don't want new creative possibilities and opportunities. We want clarity, consistency, predictability, certainty. And that can really lead us astray. And so trying to embrace this idea that there are things that we could try that maybe we've never tried before that could help us figure out what the right path is can be helpful. And so some of the micro techniques you can embrace from an experimentation place that you can try to stretch yourself with every day is reversing the direction of information. Instead of you being the flower of information, have other people tell you what's going on. Instead of you informing, have other people inform you. Instead of you knowing what the answers are, put it back on other people. And an easy way to do that is to resist the urge to answer, even if you think you know the answer, and get curious. Well, what do you think? What options have you considered? What what are you thinking about when you're challenged by this? What's the biggest challenge in this for you? So instead of saying, well, here's the answer, say, what do you think the options are? That can be a really great way of reversing the direction of information, where you can come to me and I will help you figure it out, but I'm not going to give you the answer because I want you to be a champion in this also, because that's how we help each other sustain this work over time. And again, choosing the direction and not the destination. Asking people, how does that align with where we're trying to go? You know, our vision, it's blah, blah, blah. How does that align with where we're trying to go? Great, tell me about all of that. That can be about reinforcing a direction over a destination and really helping people to align with where you're headed. And I think one of the things that has been most impactful for me is to really embrace the idea that small shifts, even though we might not be able to have major impact on our organizations and be able to completely revamp how we do work and the outcomes we get, we can make small shifts in terms of how we show up, how we address problems, how we empathize with those around us, how we engage in the lies that we naturally tell, and how we respond to those things. And those shifts can have a tremendous impact, not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us. And so again, VUCA leadership requires us to think differently, engage differently, and act differently. We have our tried and true go-to strategies. Some of them are really baked into our DNA: root cause analysis, strategic planning, performance management, those kinds of things. They're not super effective in a VUCA space. We need to do things a little bit differently. We need to be a little more flexible. We got to think about the direction we're headed in and then try our way there. We have to fail forward in our way there and how we get there. So today we've really talked about those 4 organizational strategies to VUCA: vision, understanding, clarity, and alignment. And then those individual strategies, because we have most control over how we show up and how we lead people. And that's really about having some empathy that VUCA comes with psychological side effects that impact not just us, but everybody. And so really getting good at understanding what are our go-to lies, how does that cause us to react, and how can we change that when we're feeling hijacked, and empathizing with others that they're telling themselves lies. They're responding to those things and reacting in a way that might not be super helpful, and having some empathy for that. Getting really curious, because we in VUCA, by definition, we don't have all the answers. There are no clear answers. We need as much information as we can get to try to understand what's going on. And then being willing to take that leap, to try something, to experiment, to see what we can do. And so I'd love for you to share in the chat this one last time. How are you going to embrace a VUCA leadership mindset? What can you commit to trying? What are you going to bring forward after this discussion that you can try to make a difference when it comes to how VUCA is impacting you? I would love to hear about what resonated for you. Oh, I can see lots of folks typing. I will let you get those in. I will revisit that in a moment, but since we're running out of some time, let me tell you about a few things that we're going to be sending you today. We're going to send you a VUCA cheat sheet. So it's just a quick 1-pager that talks about the 4 organizational strategies and the 3 micro techniques that we've covered today. Hopefully it's going to help to remind you to have greater curiosity, to reverse the flow of information and learn in public, empowering others to find answers, feeling okay not having all the answers. I can really resonate with that. That's a tough one. Looking for that 10%, asking for information more than giving it, letting go of control and trying to stay curious, resetting your focus so that you can think about how you react before you respond, listening more. I love that. managing those defaults. Those are all really great ideas. And we hope that this handout that we're going to send you, you can print it out, that it'll act as a reminder for you of what you can do in these moments, because we are all in the VUCA. We are all here dealing with the volatility, the uncertainty, the complexity, and the ambiguity that exists in our work worlds. And it's having an impact on our organizations and our people. And so really thinking about how we can build more awareness for ourselves and try things a little bit differently moving forward. We're also going to send you the recording of the webinar. You can share it, you can watch it again if you want, but along with the PowerPoint slides, in case you want the visual of what we talked about today, you're going to get all of these slides so you can revisit them. And we hope that if you have any questions that you'll reach out to us, because we're happy. We love talking about VUCA. And so let us know what questions come up for you, or if you forget a piece or what that might be. Being more patient, resist to tell, listen more, talk less. Yes, I love all of that. A couple things for you to know. If you want to learn more about what it looks like to lead implementation efforts in your organization, we do have our Implementation Leadership Academy. We just had one finished this week. We've got a couple of our Academy alumni, our newest Academy alumni here with us today, which is awesome. But our next Academy starts in January. For those alumni that are on, if you want to tell people about it, you're welcome to. But it's just a great way of thinking through how to do this think, act, engage differently piece in practice. So lots of tools, principles, and strategies to help you lead implementation efforts in your organization. We'd love to see you there. You can also just sign on for our newsletter on our website. We send out all sorts of tools and ideas and thoughts and webinar invitations on our newsletter. So we would love to have you join us for that so that we can stay in touch and you can be a part of our community that we're building. We also have what's called a Pay It Forward program. So if you know someone who might be a good fit for our Implementation Leadership Academy, you can nominate them through our website or on social media, and we draw names every single class and have a handful of folks join us for free as our guests to check out the Academy. We would love to know who you think should be there. And so we'd love for you to nominate someone in your organization. Thank you so much for being here. We've really enjoyed being able to talk about VUCA and how that plays out in our day-to-day life. We'll stay on here if you have any questions and you want to put them in chat. I can answer any VUCA questions that you might have. Otherwise, thanks again for being here, and we hope to see you next time as we talk about new and interesting things that come up in our VUCA spaces. So nice to see you all. Thank you so much for joining us.